me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Hi, everybody. 5 o'clock on Friday again. Time for another episode of Cello Chat. And with me today is Josh Gindele. I'm super excited to have you on the program, Josh. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. I'm in the middle of a very, very busy summer season, and so I'm coming to you from the Norfolk Festival in Connecticut, where in the background you might hear some string players warming up for coachings and rehearsals.
Nice, nice. Well, thanks for being my guest. I'm super excited to ask you a number of questions about chamber music and just how you go about doing what you do. But to start things off, would you mind just giving people a little story of a biography of how you got started with that viola all the way to how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. Both of my parents are amateur musicians, and sort of a family obligation in the when I was younger was everybody needed to play an instrument. I actually started on the violin because my dad was an amateur violinist. I very quickly realized that was not for me. I was studying with a Suzuki teacher who noticed that I was going to be a pretty big kid. So she said, well, let's try the cello. I was really young, though. I was 3.5, maybe 4 by the time I switched over. And they didn't have these quite as small fractional cellos as they do now. So my teacher, who also happened to work at a violin shop at the same time, put a viola in an end pin. Excuse me, that was backwards. An end pin in a viola. So that was my first instrument. And, I studied as a Suzuki kid for a long time. I grew up in Pittsburgh. So I played in the youth symphony and obviously worked with lots of members of the Pittsburgh Symphony. When I went to undergraduate, I decided I was a very serious athlete. I was a tennis player. I decided I wanted to go to a school where I could play tennis. But I didn't want to go do the Division I thing. There was not a school that sort of suited my needs as a cellist and as an athlete. So I went to Oberlin College, which is where the Miró Quartet started in 1995. I worked with Peter Rido there. And then as a quartet, we went to the Cleveland Institute of Music, where I spent a little time with Richard Aaron. And of course, we coached with like Don Weilerstein and Peter Saloff and the Cavani Quartet. And then we ended up doing the residency at Juilliard, where I worked with Joel Krosnick, and we kind of honed our quartet skills. So now the quartet has been in existence for almost 30 years. We're coming up on 30 years fairly soon. And we play all over the world. We teach at the University of Texas, where we have actually been at for 20 years now. And we both coach chamber music and run the string chamber music program, but also teach privately as well.
Outstanding.
Was that thorough?
Yes, I love it. So if we can talk a bit about the Miró Quartet. I am very intrigued about a number of things. I mean, even by the time you all got started, there were quite a number of established quartets that had already put out their version of the Beethoven cycle and, their stamp on just about everything. And then you all studied with several different teachers at several places, and yet you have a sound that's your own. And I think my favorite thing about it, I read through some of the quartet's interviews, some of your interviews, and you refer to intentionally having a flexible style as a quartet, rather than here's our one interpretation. Yeah. And so I'm very curious about that. In part, how did you manage to keep that maybe through the years, despite the various places where you were, in places where you were studying? And then what are the complications of, because everything kind of has some trade-offs. When you go into a performance knowing that, well, we tend to do it this way, but if he does it a lot more that way, I'm going with him.
Right. Well, we're non-hierarchical. in nature. We don't have anybody who, I mean, like old school quartets used to, the first violinist would come in with bowings and fingerings and gestures and dynamic markings. We don't really believe in that. We believe that the quartet is really the amalgam of four unique personalities. As a group, we are very different musically, the four of us. Our commonality is that we're working towards making the quartet sound as good as possible at all times. We're serial rehearsers. We rehearse and still rehearse at least 5 days a week for 3 hours. We're 30 years into this. But the big thing is that, everybody, because we have such unique personalities in our group, everybody comes in to each day and at each rehearsal and each concert and each dress rehearsal in a different place. Somebody could be very energetic, feeling really inspired. Somebody could have been worn down by a day of family or something at work that didn't go well, or, their air conditioning broke. And we have to create space for that. But that also affects, all of those variables affect musically what somebody does day to day. And if you just, if you recreate something over and over again the same way, you're not allowing for personalities to exist in the quartet and in life. So we try to rehearse in a way that we understand who is assuming the role, a leadership role at any given moment in a piece, and then how they execute and how they decide to do it, or what tempo they decide to play, or volume or color, or what rubato they use. That's how we have to react. And we know that where that leadership exists, so we know where to go. We're never really lost. We never feel like, I never feel sort of like that I don't really know what's going to happen. And because we've been playing together for so long, there's also a sort of sense, because we know each other's playing so well, that, if Daniel does one thing, I kind of know how to respond and what's going to happen next. But we just try to develop that in our young years. And that also came from a place of real mutual respect for each other. We spend a lot of time working on our relationships with each other personally, to make sure that we're really healthy, and we're not coming into situations where we're angry or upset with each other, because that leads to sort of, angry, aggressive, or maybe sort of spiteful music making that you can hear, or at least you can feel as a listener. So a lot of the way we interact with each other also has to do with just the fact that we maintain really, really good personal relationships with each other.
That's a good point. I think we put so much into our choices in the way that we play and the sound that we like and that we want, that it's easy to get defensive. For example, if somebody asks, not just the tuning of a pitch, but an articulation a little bit different or something like that. To cultivate a way of talking to each other where the defensiveness is not it's assumed the opposite, that they're saying everything in a constructive way.
We work really hard to depersonalize things, even in our comments. Like if I get the sense that somebody's playing, let's just, as an example, somebody's playing something flat, right? I won't be accusatory and say, hey, Will, I think your F sharp is flat. I will say, hey, could we tune this chord? That depersonalizes. It takes the onus away from one person, and it puts the onus on the whole group. So depersonalization is a big part of it. And then also just a little bit of checking the ego at the door, realizing that if your common goal is to make the quartet sound as good as possible, it doesn't matter if somebody wants a different articulation, or a slightly different tempo, or a different phrasing, or, and that was actually one of the things that was really hard for us as a young quartet, because we all felt like we know exactly how it should go. And we quickly realized that music and art are subjective, and there's never the way it should go. And so if we can just check that ego when we walk into rehearsal or when we walk into the concert hall, that's hugely beneficial.
Excellent. I want to come back, if I may, briefly to the attitude of flexibility. Just in my experience, there are musicians who are more or less kind of willing to be surprised by something new in the performance situation. You know what I mean? So I think it's
Sure.
something about your quartet as a whole where you are always in the moment and enjoying that fact rather than wait, I want these certain things that I can kind of count on in our interpretation. Would you agree?
I do, but also, I tell people this a lot. I'm in a music festival right now where I'm working with a lot of great students from the best conservatories in the world. And they unfortunately only get up on stage and play their piece once. So when things don't go well, or if they're surprised by something, it can be upsetting. And I understand that because they want to put their best foot forward at all times. We're in a unique situation where, we play 100 concerts a year. So I might play this Dvorak quartet we're playing tomorrow night, 40, 50 times. Obviously, we play other rep too. So if something doesn't go perfectly in that moment for us, we kind of smile and laugh because we know we have another opportunity. And that moment comes back to the next rehearsal and we say, okay, this is a little bit of a mess. This didn't work. Whatever happened, we just didn't react very well. What can we do in the next concert that allow us to clean this up a little bit? And that's why we're able to kind of laugh these things off too, because we do have a lot of opportunities to play.
All right. That's great. All right. Can I talk a little bit about how in one of the interviews you talk about the importance of the bass sound that you want in a string quartet? So for example, I think a lot of us realize we have to project more when we're playing that concerto with a whole bunch of people accompanying us, and you're the lead voice the whole time. Whereas in a string quartet, I think some people might think, okay, so you get to just be quieter and blend with the upper strings. But it sounds to me like you want, I guess I'm basing this also on hearing you all perform. It's like that satisfying moment in a number of ensembles that have a string bass. And when the bass comes in, you get that really profoundly deep sound that you feel in your feet. So anyway, I don't know, do you have a philosophy of the cello role in a string quartet?
I mean, it's very nuanced, obviously, but we build everything from the bass up. So intonation, quality of sound, volume is all gets started from the bottom. It's sort of like building a house. I'm the foundation. I'm the thing that holds the thing together. And everything else, all the framing, all the sheetrock, and windows and stuff are just sitting on top of that foundation. So even in terms of like shaping and phrasing, we tend to allow the cello to lead. Like, let's say the first violin is playing a tune. I'm actually doing a little more of the shaping and leading from the bottom than he's doing up on top. He's more worried about his color, his sound, playing beautifully. And I'm like kind of guiding him through it, as opposed to him sort of feeling like he's dragging me along with the tune. For us, the cello is, just that place of creating a sound that everybody can be on top of, and the color that makes sense to the dynamic that the composer has written. And then even just the shaping and pacing. The cello also is, as much as I hate to admit it in front of a fellow cellist, it's the slowest to speak. We can't quite articulate as strongly, especially when we're down low, as maybe a violinist can do on thinner, shorter strings. So I have to also work hard to kind of create that for them too. So I'm often like imitating what I'm hearing in the violins and trying to make sure that I can match those types of things. So yeah, no, the cello sort of for us is the de facto leader in so many aspects of the quartet.
Interesting. Oh, there are some really interesting points in there. So when I'm playing, with my quartet, I tend to like a heavier stick. And I find to get some of the articulations that they're getting, I really have to be in quite a, well, substantially different part of the bow. But is that part of why you like a lighter stick, so that it's a little bit more built in to be violinistic, perhaps?
I don't know if it's that. I like them because I can get from frog to tip quicker. And I like the fact that you know, a more flexible. I tend to use more like traditional old school French type bows. It gives me a lot of flexibility with color, and that's the big thing for me. Is I can really manipulate the stick to create a lot of different color and sounds for the quartet, and I can still get enough power out of them, and I can still get enough articulation. But I also, because of the quartet, we like to do a lot of things at the tip of the bow. We start a lot of phrases up bow. We tend to play a lot of short strokes closer to the tip. And the lighter bow allows me to be a little more agile. And it's just a personal thing. The other thing that honestly helps me a lot is I'm 6'2", 210 pounds. I don't have a whole lot of problems getting weight into the string in various parts of the bow, and I have long arms. So I don't necessarily need that. I don't need the stick in particular to create that weight or articulation for me, because it's built into my body. But I do know, like, because I teach privately, I've got a lot of students who are like 5 feet tall and 110 pounds soaking wet, and they struggle to be able to articulate the tip because they don't have the length in their arms, or they don't quite have the weight even at the frog to get the kind of articulation that I might want to hear in a string quartet.
Interesting. Let's see. So that reminded me, in another one of your interviews, I think you talk about having several favorite bows and that you like to rotate among them. So you actually, I think in that interview, you come across as, are you someone who likes to, on a regular basis, try out different instruments, different bows, different rosins, different strings?
I used to be.
Oh.
I've really found a really great situation right now. I mean, not even right now, over the last maybe few years, both in terms of like, I used to buy lots of bows. Man, I used to just I'd come across them when we'd be touring Europe, and I would just pay cash for them and bring them home. And, and I would have boxes of them that I would play. And then what I realized very quickly is that I would come back to the same 3 or 4, which is exactly where I am now. I've got 4 really great bows that I love to play. And I rotate them for a couple reasons. One is they each do something a little different, and certain repertoire are a little better suited to different bows. Because we play so much, fresh hair is always a nice thing. So sometimes I just worn one down and I just need to switch because I need a little more grip and a little more bite in the hair. I really have found like a nice, happy place right now with, as far as equipment and things like that. In the last probably 5 years, I don't really haven't changed much. I did buy another bow recently, but it was from the same maker who made my other favorite bow, and I just came across it. So I was like, I had no intention of buying another bow, but I did.
That's whether you had an intention or two or not, you just find yourself.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Let's see. So is there a particular approach you like, or do you have any words of wisdom about helping to inspire students in times of their careers when they know they ought to practice more, but they have not found the motivation to do so?
The only thing I can say is, and it's one of the reasons my quartet rehearses regularly as we do, and I learned this actually from the Vermeer Quartet. We actually, strangely enough, here at the Norfolk Festival years ago when we were fellows, the one thing I noticed is that they got up on stage and they just, they were kind of at the twilight of their career, but holy cow, I mean, they just sounded unreal. And I asked Mark Johnson, the cellist, and maybe even Shmuel Ashkenazi, I said, so what's the secret here. And they said, there's two things. One is we always told each other that when our personal playing slipped, we would stop. And so that was the first one. And they did that, actually. That's exactly how they lived. But the big one was, they said, we rehearse as often as we can. And even if it's only for just a little bit, even if we can squeeze in an hour on the road or at a festival or something, we do it consistently. And I took that when I was a student, and I was never a hugely motivated practicer, honestly. I loved rehearsing, but what I did realize was that if I was just consistent with my personal practice and I do this in my own fitness, and I did this when I was an athlete too, and I realized that consistency is far more important than like the totality of hours that you commit to it. So even now as a professor, when my students are unmotivated, I said, can you just, even if you just leave your cello on your bed in your apartment or something, and just pick it up and play some scales or play some box suites or do something for like just 15, 20 minutes and then set it down. That it has a greater effect on their overall growth than not playing for 4 or 5 days and then sitting down and trying to force themselves to practice for 3 or 4 hours. The other thing I tell my students, and that was a lesson I learned from the Vermeer, they were consistent and they sounded great. The other thing is keep it accessible. So when my students have their cello in their locker at the university, and then they've got to leave their apartment, walk to school, or get on a city bus, then they got to go to their locker, get their cello, go up to the practice room, and then practice, and then come back down and lock it away. You know, it's the process becomes really challenging. So I said, like, put your cello in your room, literally take it out of its case, leave it on the bed, or leave it on a chair with a bow out and a music stand out. And then when you just walk by it and you think, I should play that, play it. It's so much easier than that hour ritual that you need to have to go get your instrument or go to some building that it's sitting in. And that, even again, that encourages consistency, and consistency is really the name of the game in terms of growth and getting better at the instrument. So create less barriers to entry in terms of your playing, and that seems to help a lot too.
Nice. I like that. All right, Classical Lounge. What inspired you to start that a number of years ago?
That's funny. A couple things. I mean, one is Facebook was starting to have a pretty big impact on the world in terms of social media, but it was really hard to navigate and find content that was specific to what I at the time was really interested in, which was just classical music and meeting other musicians and having conversations about careers and things. I mean, honestly, we could still use Classical Lounge now because there's still a lot of stuff that I think a lot of barriers we could break down if we all just had more interaction with each other. But my brother was in tech. A very good friend of mine owned a company that created platforms for social media. And so it just seems sort of like a natural thing to try to start something that could make sense. I mean, what ended up being more challenging than I thought was balancing a career in teaching at the University of Texas while traveling and playing. We were at the time traveling like 275 days a year, and then trying to market this product and have it gain traction. So it was a lot of fun, but eventually we sold it, and more just because the workload became a little bit overwhelming.
All right. So future projects for the rest of the year, what's coming up after Norfolk Festival?
Well, let's see. We are headed to the Saratoga Performing Arts Center this weekend to play some concerts. We go annually to a festival that we just adore on Orcas Island, which is in the San Juan Islands off the coast of Washington State. And we will be up there for a number of weeks this summer. And then, we're headed down to Mexico City. We have some stuff, just general touring as we always do. But we've got some stuff. We're releasing an album, hopefully sometime in the near future, of premieres that we commissioned from Kevin Putz, who won the Pulitzer Prize a number of years ago, and Caroline Shaw, who also won the Pulitzer Prize. And we're doing that along with the Barber String Quartet and George Walker's the Adagio from his first string quartet. So that's in the future. We'll see what happens. We are also releasing an album of all Haydn string quartets. So those are all recorded already. It's now just trying to figure out what the release schedule is going to look like. What else? We have a new premiere from Jake Hagee coming up fairly soon, and we're doing a lot of collaborating. We're having some discussions with some fairly significant artists to do some really cool collaborations, which we love. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's status quo for us. We there's so much great repertoire to learn and play as a string quartet, and you know, and so many projects that we could potentially take on that we're discussing them all, you know, and there's never for lack of things to do. It's a very, very busy life. Yeah.
Yeah. Outstanding. Well, more power to you, and I can't wait to hear all those new albums. Well, thanks so much,
yeah, we'll
Josh.
get them out soon.
All right. It's
of course.
Yep. Wonderful thoughts. Lots to think about, lots to inspire our practicing all this weekend, all next week, until next Friday when I'll see you all again.
You had me at